I'm Happy Viking, and I'm here to make you awesome, one frothy pint of metal at a time. So drink up. We metalheads have a rich, diverse, and seemingly backwards vocabulary. When we say sick, wicked, or even bad, we mean good. But one of our subculture's favorite words by far is, of course, brutal.
Brutal. Oh, that's brutal.
That's brutal.
It's the most brutal thing ever. And the heaviest, deepest, most brutal part.
Metalheads love things that are brutal. Brutality is like catnip to a metalhead, a bizarre, unreasonable attraction that we just can't fight. It hasn't always served us well in the past. I mean, metalheads are largely the reason most horror movies have at least 10 to 13 terrible sequels. But still, we metal men and women love things that are unrelentingly heavy and crushing. And the band I'm reviewing today is spectacularly brutal. I'm gonna warn you right now, this is not music for the squeamish. No, this is music for tough and burly people. People who eat broken glass and shit bottles. And they take those bottles and fill them with their piss. But because they're so tough and burly, the piss is actually beer. Really cheap beer too. The kind of beer that tastes suspiciously like piss. Anyway, if you're not the kind of person who regularly pays their rent with bear pelts, raw meat, and icy glares, you're probably not going to get into this music right away. In fact, the shock of it might just kill you outright. And since I'm sure most of you folks are average Joes who have never tangoed with anything more brutal than, say, tech support, I'm going to start you off slow and acclimatize you to this shit. Okay? Breathe in and begin. Oh yeah. You feel that? That fat, sloppy sound of Armageddon? That slow, lurching storm of sludge metal? That rumble in your guts? It's pretty great, isn't it? I'm sorry to say, though, that rumbling in your guts is actually from a grievous stomach wound, because you've just been hit by Horn of the Rhino! On the deep building the center. Horn of the Rhino. What can I say? Nothing. I can't say anything about Horn of the Rhino because Horn of the Rhino speaks for itself. It's simply brutal. It's thick, dark, and nasty. It's like Satan cold-cocking you in the back of the head with his dick. Coincidentally, Horn of the Rhino actually uses Satan's dick on the cover of their latest album. Ew. It's almost as grody as the pregnant skull tits on the last album, which is almost as unnerving as the devil horn Jesus on the album before that. Oh, and don't even get me started on the madness that's actually on the albums. These are the albums of a band that purely and sincerely does not give a fuck. They will grind your ass into dust, mix your ass dust with cement, and use it as mortar for a statue of a giant middle finger pointed directly at your grave. And it's all because you didn't know about Horn of the Rhino. Better start learning, kid. Fortunately, Professor Viking is here to educate you sorry sad sacks of shit and shame. Granted, my credentials are in crayon and my doctorate comes from a school I made up as part of a tax scheme, but never you mind. Anyway, Horn of the Rhino. Formed in 2004, this band of brusque and burly ball smashers are from Bilbao, Biscay, Basque country. So, they're basically Spaniards, and anyone who's seen The Princess Bride knows that Spaniards are the sickest bros. Well, the second sickest bros, next to these here sick bros. Despite being brutal as hell and capable of headbutting your head clean off your shoulders, I'd like to reiterate that these bros are indeed sick bros. Look at that guy. Look at that smile. You can't hate him. That guy, by the way, is Javier Galvez, singer, songwriter, guitarist, and co-founder of the band, along with drummer Julen Gil and bassist Miguel Morale. Miguel would leave the band and be replaced by Sergio Robles in 2007, soon after the release of their first full-length album, Breed the Chosen One. And 1 year later, they would put out their second album, Dead Throne Monarch, and start their proud tradition of boss album covers with a big old picture of a monstrous devil Jesus. Here's an important bit of history. Back in those days, the band was known simply as Rhino, but due to the nefarious machinations of the man, they ran into legal issues when they tried to register the name, and so they had to change it. I guess you're not allowed to copyright a whole animal, so the guys merely decided to, instead, copyright the most badass part of the animal, the horn, and so, in 2010, they became Horn of the Rhino. On the plus side, at around this time between their second and third albums, they were picked up by Czech label Dementia Records, who specialize in this kind of heavy shit. And speaking of heavy shit, the shit got even heavier with their third album, The Ponderously Crushing Weight of Coronation. Skull Tits, go!
It's not to show no sympathy. Arriving as soon as the game. Fire with fire.
And then, finally, we have their latest and easily most aggressive release, Grangus. Devil Dick, away! So there you have it. You've just bared witness to 4 albums worth of dark and deathly ditties adorned with smog, schlongs, and skeleton titties. Dear God, that cover art, it's just, it's beautiful. Brings tears to my eyes. Now, I don't think I've ever acknowledged cover art on the show before, but Horn of the Rhino deserves special mention on that front because, well, holy fucking shit. Thank you, Rafa Garez, you crazy, amazing bastard, you. They say don't judge a book by its cover, but you know everything there is to know about Horn of the Rhino by looking at that artwork. Basically, their whole musical philosophy is, fuck your feelings, fuck your virgin eyes and your delicate psyches, we're Horn of the Rhino, and we play hard music for hard people. Oh yeah, I'm definitely a hard person now. Yeah, that artwork really lets you know that they want to give your eardrums a serious beating. And that they have a certain affinity for a certain animal. You know, goats. I'm not going to comment on the taxonomy here. You know, a band that uses goat imagery, yet it's called Rhino. I'll just chalk it up to rhinos being sweet. I mean, like, they're tough, they're angry, and they help me get my bananas back from that bitch-ass K. Rool. So, rhinos are pretty much my homeboys, really, and probably the band's homeboys, too. Now, bands that focus on being heavy and brutal and extremely provocative, they're nothing new, and they're definitely not for everyone. Hell, most of the time they're not even for me. In fact, this is probably one of the heaviest bands I've ever featured on the show. But Horn of the Rhino stands out, not just by having talented instrumentalists, but also by virtue of having a versatile singer. Now, you'd expect a band like this to have really harsh vocals, you know, the kind that are ripped straight from the black ash and ass crack of Mount Doom. And half the time, they do. But the other half of the time, Javier sings like this. Like motherfucking Chris Cornell. They mixed sludge with grunge and made slunge. I fucking love this dude's voice. Possibly in a gay way. With the band's combination of crushing instrumentals and vocals that can go from satanic to sorrowful and back again, Horn of the Rhino winds up having a pretty unique sound. It's like I Hate God got Soundgarden high on fire and had a demented tryst that resulted in a messed up devil baby. Which is pretty much the greatest thing ever. Though I do love Javier's clean vocals, I'm less fond of his harsh vocals. Javier's at his best when he sings clean because he can wail like a demon. His harsh vocals, however, though indeed harsh and heavy, aren't nearly as distinct and memorable. And I also find their post-name change work to be less dynamic than their previous albums. Now, by no means are they bad albums. They're both awesome. It's just that they don't mix things up as much as, say, Dead Throne Monarch, which I think is Horn of the Rhino's best album. See, Coronation is largely a very slow and moody album, and Grangus is largely a very fast and angry album. There's the occasional deviation from those outlines, but mostly they stay the course, and they suffer a little for it. When an album is all one thing, it gets repetitive and you can sometimes tune out. Conversely, Monarch has an even balance of fast stuff, slow stuff, sick riffs, soulful singing bits, and more. It keeps you interested and it keeps you paying attention. It's just more dynamic. They even have a subdued little acoustic number in there.
Praise my door. Praise my door.
You know, if Horn of the Rhino did the soundtrack for Wendigo, that movie would have been a million times better. In fact, it would have won all the Oscars. All of them. All of them ever. Anyways, even if they occasionally lapse into periods of tedium and repetition, Horn of the Rhino is still some of the highest quality sludge metal you're likely to find. As if I really needed to say it again, Horn of the Rhino is brutal in the greatest possible way. They rock hard, they rock loud, they do whatever the hell they want, and what they want to do is make sick-ass crushing music. Thick, crunchy guitars, heavy, unrelenting drumming, and a singer that can elevate you or decapitate you, whichever he feels like doing at the time. These guys are cool. Keep an eye on them and send away for some of their albums. And when you're swinging your dirty noggin around and brushing the air with your greasy, unkempt hair, remember to raise your fist to your forehead and salute the sovereigns of sludge. I'm Happy Viking, and you've just been served your recommended dosage of heavy metal. Rock on and drink responsibly. And now, if you excuse me, I gotta get to court in 15 minutes. Something about a tax scheme or whatever. Anyway, toodles!